So I'm just refreshing my YouTube. We are not yet there. Okay, we can start in 30 seconds. Yeah. Firstly, apologies for the delay. We had some technical glitches in the back end. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you and your loved ones are in good health. My name is Kirtana. I work as a HR business partner with an IT firm and I volunteer with NHRD. I would like to welcome you all to the NHRD web panel discussion on what shifts would we see in HR. Thank you for taking time and being a part of this. Today, we have the HR experts, Amitav, Gangapriya, and Anuradha with us. I would now like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves along with a fun fact about them.
Thank you, Kirtana. A warm welcome to the NHRD and HR community and everyone else who have tuned in for a conversation today. I am Amitav Mukherjee and I work with ITC as the head of corporate HR. I am also a member of the NHRD board and president of the Eastern region. In my role, I have the opportunity to shape HR strategies for ITC, and that keeps me inspired and excited, dealing with some of the fascinating people challenges one is confronted with, particularly in these times. In my spare time, I focus on my fitness and reading, particularly travel writing, historical nonfiction, and a little bit of finance. Given all the intense activity these days, I have just started out with a beginner's course in meditation, and let's see how that works. Thank you, Kirtana.
Gangapriya, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this web panel discussion. I'm Gangapriya Chakravarti. After about 30 years in HR, I have recently shifted to leading Ford's business services organization that's based in India. I also lead the Chennai chapter of the National HRD Network. I'm really happy to be part of this panel and to have Kirtana and my colleagues from the NHRD board as co-panelists. In my free time, I would love to be in the company of nature, and I'm trying to sort of get better at spotting and identifying birds.
Thank you, Gangapriya. Anuradha, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Anuradha. I head HR for Hindustan Unilever in India and Unilever in South Asia. I've worked with Unilever for 21 years now. And when I'm not busy working for Unilever, I'm equally busy managing a full life with my husband and 10-year-old son. We returned to India a year ago after being for 6 years in London. So we're still getting back and discovering what it's like to live as a family in India just when we went into lockdown. We love travel. These days, of course, I'm quite busy cooking and cleaning like everybody else. And therefore, cooking's my newfound hobby. My son's telling me that I've finally learned how to cook. And the one skill that I'm honing, again, like everybody else these days, is online shopping and sourcing of everything essential and non-essential.
Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you, panelists. Audience, if you have any questions for the panel, please post them in the comment section below. We will try to answer as many possible towards the end of the section. I would like to start with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi: "Action expresses priorities." Today, we are bombarded with information in the digital world. We hear from outside the organization, we hear from within the organization as to what everyone's priorities are. My first question is to all three of you. What are some of your priorities as a HR leader? What are employee expectations from HR?
Thanks, Kirtana. Let me try and take that question. At ITC, we believe that the dynamism and success of an enterprise is really driven by the inspiration the vision provides, the values that drive thought and action, and the vitality of its operating system. And the reason I'm saying this is from here is what follow HR priorities. If I look at the current circumstances, I think articulating, communicating, and reinforcing the company's vision is priority number one for all of us here in my company. I think there is never a more opportune time than during a crisis to be able to articulate what the company's vision is and to rally troops around that vision. I think the second important priority, I would say, would be values. And these are times when values typically get tested. So I think ensuring HR systems and policies are consistent with the values of the enterprise is a priority for me and for the HR function. For example, respect for people, customer focus, nation orientation are some of our values. And it has got reflected in our ability to be able to service consumers with essential products in this time of crisis, to be able to do so while maintaining the highest standards of safety and risk mitigation measures, being able to help the community around our units in consistency with our espoused value of being nation-oriented and helping disadvantaged sections of society with our products. These are certainly some priorities which have driven our agenda in HR. And the third one I would say is vitality. I think we are in an environment which is unprecedented, and therefore I think explaining and bringing to life a culture of frugality, resourcefulness, and dealing with limited resources, managing cash flows are very important requirements from all of us in the HR function and leaders in general in the company. I think the other part would be encouraging innovation, because any crisis also throws up opportunities for businesses to look at how they review consumers, how they look at their product portfolio. So I think innovation is the other dimension, which is a key priority. How does one drive that in the company? And how does one align the entire organization to be innovative in a situation like this?
Yeah, you were saying something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was from the employee perspective, and I think expectations which employees have from HR. I would say right now, the first expectation would be psychological comfort. I think the stability of employment, the stability of income are very important expectations from employees. The second, I would say, would be safety, risk mitigation measures. And I think that's a very, very critical requirement, especially since we have been operating in very unusual circumstances over the last 3 months. And I think the third one would be, which is really enduring and has always been there, about what is really the distinctive proposition the employer has to offer to the employee. And I think there could never be a more appropriate time than to surface this and to really reinforce the message about the importance of the distinctive proposition.
Thank you, Amitav. Gangapriya, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has really sort of got us to pivot to some very basic things. As an HR person, I would say that our top priority is really the safety and health and well-being of our employees. That's the first thing. And it's brought to light that much more starkly. So I think that's a primary priority for us. And I think particularly when people are anxious about their health situation, they're anxious about the pandemic that's sort of raging in the country and in many of our major cities, I think giving them the assurance that they can be in the safety of their homes, or if they're coming into the office, that they can sort of be assured of very high levels of safety protocols that will be put into place that will really minimize or reduce all kinds of risks that they have of contracting the infection. So I think that is, I would say, at least in the short term, primary priority for us. And these are really unprecedented times, like Amitav mentioned. And I think employees need that reassurance that they are being cared and looked after. Yeah, so that care could come in many parts, assuring them that their employment is in place. Yeah, their incomes will to a great extent be protected. The company has enough reserves to sort of survive this and to be able to overcome the challenges the coronavirus situation has sort of posed on itself. So all of these are really part of looking after the safety and well-being of our employees. I think the longer term focus continues to be that we need to have a highly engaged, motivated and capable workforce, because the ambitions of the organization are in no way impacted. They may be temporarily jeopardized, but ambitions of the organization continue to sort of be quite high, and we need to sort of help the organization by being our best selves and having a workforce that is really capable of delivering and making up for what may have been lost in these last few months. So I think that's another area. As for employee experience, I think in the short term, of course, the primary concern is whether the business will be able to sort of come out of this in good shape. Therefore, there's a lot of communication that is happening, which talks about the state of the business to employees on a fairly regular basis, which is really about providing assurance. And I would say very importantly for us, showing that, everything is getting back to normal, however abnormal the situation around us may be. So giving them the sense that, it's we're trying to be business as usual as far as possible within the constraints that we have. And I think employees are also increasingly now thinking about what that new normal is going to look like and how is it going to be when they get back to the office and get back to work. So I think there's increasing curiosity about it. There's increasing anxiety about it. And I think there is also openness, I feel, to experiencing what this new normal could look like.
Thank you, Gangapriya. Anuradha, would you like to go next?
A lot of resonance with what Gangapriya and Amitav have said. If I have to sum up what my team and my focus and priorities have been in the last few months, it's really been on lives and livelihoods. The first thing is really health and safety of our people, and the slew of actions that we have taken since early March now, just before our people shifted to our new ways of working, whether it was heightened safety and new work protocols in factories and in the field, or whether it was 4,500 people who moved to working from home. And then, of course, since then, starting with their insurance, medical care, really a whole host of actions focused on the health and safety of the employees, their families, and much more an approach to their holistic well-being. That's taken up a lot of our times. When it comes to livelihoods, I think Unilever very responsibly, I feel proud, took an early commitment that we would, for not just for our employees, but also our ecosystem of 230,000 people in India, we would protect them from sudden drops in pay. And I think that gave our ecosystem a lot of assurance. And I think that has gone a long way in keeping morale and engagement high. Having said that, now that we are past the immediate disruption that we saw in the months of March and early April, the focus is very much back to growth and what it means to make sure that business operations continue with, without any discontinuity on account of people or manpower issues, keeping people engaged and poised for growth. If I shift, to a slightly longer term horizon, I think there is a lot that we are learning as a business, as a workforce from this time. And therefore, sort of gleaning those insights and reflecting and planning ahead for what it means fundamentally for the business, but also talent and capabilities that we will have to pivot for our workforce. And of course, what the workplace of the future will look like, given the scale that we have, given the scale of change that we have all experienced. So those are some of the things that are keeping us busy, Kirtana.
Thank you, Anuradha. So as per our NHRD research, the HR leader of the future is authentic and has a human-centered approach. She has a sharp strategic business acumen. He's the transformation catalyst, builds mastery of technology and analytics, leverages expanded domain boundaries, and build expertise as culture architect. My next question is to you, Amitav. What would be the key characteristics of future CHROs if they have to be successful?
Thanks, Kirtana. I think there are a lot of opinions about this, but I would depend on the research material which is available, and NHRD has undertaken a research project in this area and spoken to over 78 to 80 CHROs to understand what really could be the expectations and capabilities of CHROs going ahead. And 6 key things emerge, and I thought I'll dwell on those. I think the first one, which is really enduring and has always been a requirement of any CHRO, has been the understanding and appreciation of business strategy and business acumen. How does value get created in an organization? What can HR do to accelerate or strengthen those value creation elements? What could be done to amplify a competitive advantage in a firm are all critical components of this skill. I think the other dimension which is emerging as an important characteristic of a CHRO would be the ability to leverage learnings from other disciplines. HR has always borrowed from labor economics, sociology, psychology, but we are also seeing a requirement now to look at behavioral economics, consumer behavior and marketing, especially when it is becoming so critical to communicate to employees and prospective employees the positioning of a firm and what it stands for. So I think successful CHROs will certainly have to have the ability to tap into eclectic expert knowledge bases and be able to construct and synergize these to make a compelling piece of work in any area. The third dimension, I would say, is really about architecting the culture. And I think as the traditional role of the HR head, of course, has been to be an employee champion, but it's also equally important that one facilitates a culture change when it is required, when businesses need to pivot. And that is a third dimension, which is a very important expectation from a CHR. The fourth one, which emerged, was being a transformation catalyst. I think we are looking at situations where business strategy really needs to change. Certain capabilities need to be added at a fairly rapid pace. Speed is of essence. So what could HR leaders do to enable organizations to make this immediate and quick change when the situation so demands? Okay. So I think apart from an internal appreciation of what the business demands, an external orientation of what's happening outside in the environment becomes extremely critical. And therefore, to play the role of being a transformation catalyst, the dual capability of business acumen and an awareness of the external environment is really fundamental to be able to do that successfully. The fifth dimension is really about building technology and analytics mastery. I think with data sciences, there is tremendous amount of information available to be able to take well-informed people decisions. Now, is the CHRO able to harvest this information, analyze it, address privacy concerns of employees, and able to ensure that this data feeds into HR strategy becomes an extremely critical requirement going ahead of a CHRO. And I think lastly, I would say at the heart of all these changes is whether the CHRO is really human-centered and authentic. And I think on the last dimension, the CHRO really has to be an exemplar and walk the talk in terms of authenticity, in terms of human connectedness. And I think those I would summarize as really key characteristics of CHROs, well borne out by the research which NHRD had done recently.
Thank you, Amitav. So recently, the NHRD, we did a research, and we found out that these were the rankings of 8 key HR shifts, both pre-COVID and post-COVID. Here, 2 of the areas are of, have some interesting values here. One is the wellness, emotional health, and psychological safety. It was ranked 7 pre-COVID, and right now it is ranked number 3. And also it is the most fast-tracked HR shift. Apart from this, another interesting shift is the focus on continuous upskilling, reskilling, and reinvention. It was ranked 1 pre-COVID and is also ranked number 1 post-COVID. Also, as per our NHRD research, we have seen that more firms are giving a lot of emphasis on learning, irrespective of the turnover, firm size, or the industry that the companies are in. My next question is to you, Gangapriya. How does the pandemic accelerate focus on continuous upskilling, reskilling, and reinvention? Which is the top HR shift? Which is the top HR shift pre-COVID and post-COVID? What are the HR interventions made by your organization to fast track this HR shift?
Sure. It's very interesting that focus on learning and upskilling has continued to be the top priority for HR pre and post COVID. And it's no surprise at all, because at the end of the day, all employees have to ensure that they have the necessary skill sets. They need to sort of have the knowledge that is required. They need to have understand what's the latest in their area of work. They need to really sort of know what's new in their specialization area. So I think whether it was COVID or not, I think the expectation is that people show up with the best capabilities that they have. And to that effect, I think companies continuing to focus on learning activities. One. The second thing is the world itself is changing really fast. Technology is changing, circumstances are changing, geopolitics is also getting sort of impacted. So in all of this, the only thing that will keep employees and companies relevant is access to the right kind of skills and knowledge. Yeah, and it's no surprise then that the survey that we did pre as well as post-COVID highlighted that, employees have to ensure that they have the right kind of skill sets that is required for them to deliver on their job, come whatever the situation may be and whatever the changes may be in the situation around them. At Ford, I would say that the pandemic has actually been an opportunity for us to look at new ways of delivering training. Previously we were sort of restricted to a classroom which could accommodate maybe 25 people. Yeah, today you can bring in 100+ people in a virtual session for training. So while moving to the virtual platform, we have been able to reach out to many people. This reach has meant that people are exposed to new trainers because trainers can be all over the place. It also means that your peers in the learning room are very diverse. They could be from different geographies. They would be people that you may not have interacted ever, but have different perspectives to bring that enriched learning. So that's the second thing that we see. The third is this move to using virtual platforms is also making sure that the learning team in Ford is getting more comfortable with technology. They're actually working on training programs that were only meant to be face-to-face, and they have been able to convert it, like for instance, design thinking. For a long time, it was thought to be training that could be just given in a face-to-face manner, but they've been able to successfully convert it into a virtual training module where, you can do prototyping without the physical parts, but you can do it with the digital tools that you have access to. So I think it's also pushed the learning team to really look at different ways in which they can convert the training curriculum that we have, which was predominantly face-to-face, and deliver it online. And I would say the other thing is that with work from home, we find that employees have a little more time on their hands because they don't have the regular commute. So there is time that they can invest in. So attendance in our training programs have really shot through the roof. And it's become much easier because there's also some flexibility that employees have in terms of when they participate, how they participate, etc., which may have not been the case. So I will say that the focus has remained the same, but it's really the methods that have actually enriched our ability to deliver and ability to receive training, which I think is what we are seeing through this pandemic.
Thank you, Gangapriya. As per the NHRD research, we have seen that 60+% of the respondents to our surveys post-COVID have revisited health and wellness policies, irrespective of the turnover, firm size, or the industry that the company is operating in. My next question is to you, Anuradha. What makes wellness, emotional health, and psychological safety the most fast-tracked HR shift compared to the others? Are your employees talking to you more about fatigue now? Can you share one initiative that is made by your organization in the last 3 months related to wellness?
So why well-being has jumped to the top of the list nearly is not really a surprise, but everything that we've known of the way we live and the way we work has been thrown asunder by this pandemic in the last few months. Everything that we took for granted, the simple act of stepping out of home, the familiarity of going to a workplace, our health and safety, everything has shifted. We are having to learn new ways of doing things, whether it's managing households, simple things like sourcing grocery and essentials, and of course, learning to work in a new context, in a new surrounding, which is unfamiliar for most people who not worked agile at this scale and at this stretch of time before. Equally, there's a quote that's going around on social media a lot these days saying that we are all in the same storm, but we're not on the same boat. There are many of us who are seeing challenges of a very, very different order. What I may see or grapple with my family is very different from someone who may be living alone and feeling isolation. Someone who is looking after people who are vulnerable, or someone who has a disability. And in this context, it's no surprise that health, well-being, the feeling of wellness is something that comes to the fore. And therefore not surprising at all. Are our employees talking to us about it? Yes, of course. And what are we doing about it? First and foremost, we've really amped up the number of listening posts for our employees to tell us how they are thinking, how they are feeling about the smallest things. Employee town halls, leader huddles, peer-to-peer buddy systems. We've put all that in place. And employees appreciate that. I think the one big shift is that where earlier you could look at making say impact over a few months, and therefore pulse checks that you did over 6 months or a yearly basis were adequate. Now we're working to much shorter in much shorter time impact cycles, and therefore we are doing pulse checks initially almost every other week and now every month. And then we sort of take an action, we feedback, we close the loop, and that continues. About 2 weeks into this new way of working, we started seeing well-being and wellness come up as an issue across different levels. The first thing we did is that we are investing in the extended leadership of our organization, the top 200 leaders, and really working with them to think about how they want to lead their teams. What's the resilience that they want to build for themselves and their teams through this time of uncertainty. The second thing that we've done is we've internally developed a very simple tool called a well-being quotient. It allows you to take a survey with 10 or 15 questions which focus on all aspects of your well-being, physical, emotional, what you're going through at home, what your work effectiveness looks like, and it throws up a score for you, which allows you to reflect on which part of your work and life effectiveness you can do better at. And then we encourage line managers and employees to have a very open conversation. If they're not comfortable talking to their line managers, they can talk to an HR partner, they can talk to a buddy. We also have a reach out employee assistance program. And that's something which we find has really made a difference. Let me tell you also that sometimes we think that, the big strategic things that we do really matter. We did a really simple and small thing in response to one of the points of feedback that our employees gave us. They were saying that, the chairs and equipment we have at home is not ergonomically designed for us to spend such long stretches of time. So we found a way to send people home their office chairs. And I can't tell you, literally every day, this morning included, I woke up to a message saying, "Dear Anuradha, thank you for this gift from the organization." And if I actually think in everything that we've done in the last 3 months, this simple act has got me more positive feedback from employees than many other bigger things. So that's a little bit about what we are doing.
Thank you, Anuradha. Moving on to the next question. So as per the NHRD, can you see my screen? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
As per the NHRD research, so the top 3 skills that CHROs need in 2030 are as below, with strategic business acumen rated the top skill. My next question is to you, Amitav. How do you adapt strategy to an ever-changing environment? How do you as a HR leader co-create your response to the crisis? And can you share an experience?
Sure. I think there are some principles which I hold dear in being adaptive to the changing environment. And I would list these as, I think the first principle is really recognizing that strategy is really emergent, which means it's as much as top down as it is bottom up, and listening to employees, particularly in the front line, middle managers, and then crafting strategy. I think the second important principle is to recognize who are the experts in the organization, particularly in a time like this, who is the right individual to approach if it's medical advice. Very critical to be able to frame a qualified response. I think the third element of being responsive and adapted would be not just doing contingency planning, but also scenario planning. And finally, I think would be partnering with several colleagues in the organization to give a unified response to the situation. I think in the beginning of the crisis, we were faced with the Herculean task of ensuring essential products, and there are several in our portfolio, reach consumers. And how do we do this in a manner which is safe, where the employee feels comforted when he shows up at work, either at the factory or at the office or at the warehouse, that his concerns of safety are taken care of. And I think in partnership with business managers, with HR leaders across the company, we were able to put down very, very strict protocols, firstly on the dimension of safety. So whether it's thermal scanning, whether it's installation of UV scanners, whether it's providing personal protective equipment to over 27,000 employees, I think these were some of the initial steps we took. Thereafter, very stringent protocols about social distancing at work. Recently, we have introduced a technology solution which allows us to contact trace in the event of an infection. Now, all of these have really been built in partnership with a larger team. The other thing which we have done structurally is we have put in place a business contingency team as well as a central contingency team comprising of key stakeholders. I think that allows us to respond very quickly. And in a crisis like this, I think the situation is always evolving, and you need to be ready to respond, change course if necessary, and do so rapidly. I think that is what has really helped us in able to deal with this crisis.
Thank you, Amitav. Would one of you like to add to this point?
Yeah, I am happy to. I think really a lot of resonance with what Amitav has said, a lot of similarities. The one thing I'll add is that we had the benefit of our businesses in China and Italy who had sort of been, unfortunately, ahead of the curve on this. And therefore, a lot of learnings that we took from them. Early in March, I remember we took a sort of an eight pillar approach from our Unilever China learnings, which looked at it holistically, not just in terms of people health and safety, but also what would incident management look like? What would standard operating processes look like? How would you plan for sourcing of materials? How would you manage government authorities? And I think learning from them and those countries has continued to guide us. And as we think of easement or return to work, we continue to take learnings from countries that are ahead of us on this road. Similarly, I would say that this is not a time to say that I have done this better than other organizations. Even in our country, across the industry, I've had the opportunity to share with a number of my colleagues. I've lost track of the number of times Amitabh and I have spoken. And this is not a time to say that I did this better than anybody else, but to actively share. And I think that's what I would urge us all to keep doing.
Thank you, Anuradha. So we have 100 plus viewers, including TV Rao sir, Dr. TV Rao sir with us. And he shared a statement that I want to share with everyone. Learning has become a lot more self-directed post-COVID-19. Choices in some ways have increased, but in other ways have got restricted as they are chosen by some agencies and agents. So moving on to the next question. So as per the NHRD research, CHROs have identified long-term implications of COVID-19. Increased work from home, redefining processes are to name a few. My next question is to you, Gangapriya. Is there a change that you have brought about in your organization due to the pandemic that is here to stay?
Okay, actually, I think there is a saying, isn't it, that in every crisis there is an opportunity as well. And I think this pandemic is also one such. It has really taught us the level of resilience that we have in the organization, because pretty much overnight overnight would be a little bit of an exaggeration, but over a weekend, we were able to actually send about 10,000 resources that we have in our locations and get them to work from home quite effectively. And this is from a situation where a lot of managers had thought that work was such that it could never be done from a remote location. And there were a good majority of them, especially if you have product development kind of work, you have engineering drawings, you have design studios. All of those were meant to be work that had to be done on site. So I think big learning from this has been just the resilience and that can-do attitude, which I hope we will be able to take into the post when we get back to normal as well. Of course, working from home is going to become very significant as a way of working for us. And we are going to provide that as a regular option to our employees because we have tested, and pretty much every job in the company it's been possible for us to work from home, of course, with some exceptions, but even there, we do believe with rotating crew, we should be able to have every individual work from home. So that is definitely going to be one piece that will really stay. The second thing that I would say is that, a lot of employees have become quite self-directed. They've taken ownership for themselves, their work, their deliverables, and managers have also responded well and given them that space. I just hope that continues because that's really precious. And it's going to take productivity, effectiveness, capability building to an entirely different level. And the bonds that are created with the organization could be quite significant as a consequence of this. So I'm really hoping that that level of trust, the empowerment that we gave to our employees would sustain. The third thing I would think is the level of communications that we have done with our employees, and the level of leadership involvement in those communications. It has brought us together as a family. It has got us to discuss what our issues are as a company. It's talked about how we are trying to sort of solve problems that seem unsolvable. And to top it all, it's not just the virus that is an issue. We also have other issues that are confronting the company at the same time. We really don't know what the automobile industry is going to look like when all of this sort of comes to a close, or when we start learning to live with it. But the fact is that, we have come together, we are discussing these things on a weekly basis with the CEO, with Bill Ford, always appearing in the global huddle that we have, which happens every week. And we are hoping that we will be in a position to, maybe not with that level of frequency, but perhaps continue that so that we can see that connect with the employees. The last I would say is our focus on wellness. I think this pandemic has brought to the fore the need for people to look after themselves and the company's contribution to making it happen. So I think that is going to be another major area of focus, and I'm hoping that we will continue to do that with a better realization from both employees as well as the organization on what is it that will give us the best.
Thank you, Gangapriya. So we have a comment from Pradatta Mohapatra. He says, HR is the Krishna in this Mahabharat of Corona, where CEOs are Arjunas. So thank you for that. Now moving on to the next question. So as per the NHRD research of qualitative comments, we have come to know that the business's relationship with clients, orders, downturn, loss is unknown. My next question is to you, Amita. What are the impacts of the pandemic on your industry, and is your organization finding an opportunity during the crisis?
Thank you, Kirtana. Yeah, certainly, we are present across sectors in ITC, and therefore there is a differential impact. There are parts of the portfolio which have seen a huge surge in demand, partly because of the equity of the brands, partly because consumers are looking for comfort, reliability, quality, and therefore they're relying on established manufacturers, for their normal staples. There is also parts of the portfolio which are deeply affected, like the hospitality sector. So it's a mixed bag. Yes, there is a surge somewhere. There are parts of the portfolio which are not doing as well as they would have normally. And therefore, we are having to cope differentially in different parts of the company. In terms of opportunities, certainly, I think there is a heightened focus on health, wellness, safety, nutrition. We have recently launched, for example, a Savlon surface disinfectant within 1 month of conceptualizing the brand. We have launched 50 Paisa Savlon sachets. We have launched Be Natural Plus, which is an immunity boosting drink in association with Amway. So we are also witnessing a huge demand from consumers for products which give them that comfort, which give them the confidence that the safety and validity of these products would really serve their purpose. And therefore, in some sense, they serve as an opportunity. In the hospitality sector, now we are looking at accreditation by the National the Hospitals Board, so that our hotels are certified from a sanitation point of view, from the hospital board, and therefore consumers have that confidence that using these properties are in their interest and completely safe. So that's the other opportunity which we see.
Thank you, Amitav. So moving on to the next question. So as per the NHRD research, most organizations have not changed salaries, but management salaries are in focus. So my next question is to you, Amitav. In light of the prevailing uncertainty, what are some of the approaches that have been adopted by your organization for performance and reward plans?
So I think very early on in the crisis, we gave the reassurance to our employees that their remuneration is protected, that employment is protected. And I think it was very gratifying for employees. They, I think, expected that and they looked forward to that reinforcement. It is also important to recognize that remuneration is really a function of performance. So in the year going ahead, we have factored in what we expect to be business results in our performance planning, and achievement of those plans will reflect in remuneration to that extent. So in some sense, it's already built into the design of our performance plans, and the reflection will be felt downstream depending on how one performs against that objective.
Thank you, Amitabh. Anuradha, Gangapriya, would you like to add something?
I would say that at this point, rather than, this is not the time to distract the organization by making changes to performance management structures. Instead, it is the time to really focus, prioritize, and do everything that we can as leaders to enable people to drive agility and speed of decision making to get growth back and the momentum back in the business. So in line with that, we have not announced or made any changes to our performance management approaches. What we have done is called out very, very clearly the imperatives for the business in the short term for the rest of the year. And if anything, we've simplified incentives and plans where the focus is on, the whole business winning rather than certain lines of service or divisions.
Thank you, Anuradha. Gangapriya, would you like to add something?
Just one thing. In fact, we have this process within our performance management system of a regular check-in. In fact, what we have asked all our people leaders to really do is to check in with our employees more often. Previously, it used to be maybe once a quarter or maybe once in 6 months. But we've asked all people leaders or encouraged them to sort of do the check-ins more often. We have also asked them to sort of use this time to talk about employee wellness. That's another area of focus. And also, what can the company do to enable performance? Because, these are not normal times, and our homes are not really set up for working. So we've asked our managers to sort of speak to their employees and find out what is it that we can do so it's not just what have you done, what are the results, and how is it going to be, but really about enabling conversations that will ensure that performance is impacted in a positive way.
Thank you, Gangapriya. So coming to our last question, and then we'll have more questions from the audience. So my next question is to all three of you. What can HR professionals do to stay future ready and have the self-confidence to channel the energies of the entire workforce in the right direction? Anuradha, would you like to start?
So, there are a lot of things that we can talk about. We've already seen a number of skills that have been articulated in the research. For me, the one that is sort of the red thread that runs across all of them is that in whatever we do as HR professionals, we are change and transformation catalysts. And I think this is the one skill which becomes even more important as the pace of change keeps getting accelerated and more complex. For example, in the current context, what would an HR leader do? Really think about what is the disruption that is likely to affect, or the discontinuity that is likely to impact their businesses. So business acumen now more than ever, which only comes from deep business intimacy with your stakeholders and the frontline and the core of your organization, is absolutely critical. I would say that having been in Unilever for 21 years, the level of business intimacy that I got into during this crisis beat anything that I had done before. I had done a lot of strategic manpower planning and talent planning in global roles. I never thought that I would be doing, mapping by stockists or looking at where we would get frontline unskilled labor. And every time you do that, it really hones your intimacy and your ability to understand the business better. So you learn when you're having fun, but you learn more when you're really doing something which is very, very tough. And therefore, business acumen and intimacy is absolutely critical. And to that extent, really thinking about what will drive the growth and the future focus. To do that, staying connected with stakeholders, consumers, employees, and then deploying those insights into your innovation plans for the future is what I would like to call out.
Thank you, Anuradha. Gangapriya, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think, different times call for different capabilities, and, crisis really is a good time to test what your true strengths are. One, of course, whether crisis or good times, companies' ability to stick to their values, to their truths, I think is very important. And I think that's something that we should not lose focus on. We have to be driven by what the values of the company are and what do we want to do as an organization for our employees, for our business partners, for our vendors, for all of those people. We just need to make that very clear. The second thing is that this pandemic has taught us beyond, it's a great lesson in how to be agile and flexible. You don't have answers to anything. Yeah, you have to think on your feet. You could be making mistakes. You have to sort of backtrack. You have to think of new ways of doing things. So I think we have to be flexible and agile. We have redone so many policies in the last few months that we would never have done at that pace. The third thing is, I would say, listen, listen, listen. I think in a situation like this, and perhaps for all times, HR needs to have a very, very sharp sense of listening, and listening not just to what is said, but what is unsaid as well. And therefore, I think that's the other thing that I would say. The last one I would say is that, you don't know where solutions will come from. So keep your eyes and ears open. It could be a young employee, it could be an experienced person, it could be your operations folks, it could be your partner organization. Yeah, so I think you don't necessarily have all the answers, and you're not expected to give all the answers, but keep an eye out and learn from everybody and try out things that others may say.
Thank you, Gangapriya. Amita, would you like to go next?
Yeah, very similar to what Anuradha and Gangapriya said. I think number one, I would say is to think entrepreneurially, be agile, accept the fact that your solutions may not be right the first time around, and be open to changing course and responding as things evolve. The second dimension, and I think Gangapriya touched upon it, was about values. I think it's great to practice values when situations are normal, but I think values are really tested when you have a resource constraint or you're in a crisis. And it's absolutely important that as HR professionals, we stay true to these values in whatever actions we take during a crisis. And a lot of reflection and introspection would be required on this front, because it is not easy to stay true to your values when you're constrained to be able to do so. And I think the final one I would say is to lead from the front. And I think Anuradha covered it when she, in a way, spoke about getting very intimately involved in business operations. I think that is extremely key, to be seen out there, to be responding to what's happening, to be very, very hands-on, and going and showing the direction, not just talking about it. That's what I would summarize it.
Thank you, Amitav. So I just want to read out a few comments from the audience. So D.R. Nagraj says, NHRD research has come at the right time and has thrown up issues which need immediate attention. Thank you. Anu Oza says, our Krish Shankar has guided such outstanding research. He and his team deserve real commendation. And Dr. T.V. Rao says, I hope the gains mentioned by Gangapriya can be sustained. HR has a role to play for sustaining them as well as building on them in future. And Harish Devrajan says, excellent to hear the HR leaders are connecting with each other, sharing experiences, initiatives, and learning together. So much impact arising out of such simple mindset and behavior.
Harish.
Now let's go on to, yes, you were saying.
I was saying thank you to Harish. He's a dear friend and colleague.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Rao.
Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful.
So just getting into the questions. So Pradatta Mahapatra is asking, how are you helping the businesses when the business heads have downgraded their business targets and thereby demanding for a reduction of manpower? Would one of you like to take this?
I can try. First of all, I think I wouldn't generalize to say that all leaders have downgraded targets. I think the important is how HR can support, like we spoke previously, is through prioritization, helping business leaders prioritize their KPIs, the number of innovations, the number of SKUs they're manufacturing. Focus and prioritization is key. And within that, driving a sort of a value-driven approach where you focus on talent to value, where you move away from saying that I have so many people and I will operate with that mindset of I can't do without so many people. Think about redeployment. Think about how you can use resources from one part of the business, maybe which are not as stretched, into another part of the business, which needs to step up and needs more people. Think about how we can use flow to work approaches, agile, flex, etc. And these will allow us to start creating a more dynamic business mindset, which then would allow you to build up or build down depending on what your business plans are and what your targets look like.
Thank you, Anuradha. So we have a question from Durga Sinha, who is asking, how does the CHRO maintain the morale of the organization when people are uncertain of the future?
I'll take that. I think that has been one of the things that we have done from the very beginning, to say that, work will continue the way it has to continue and has been. And yes, there could be some disruptions. Yeah, and in our case, we have sort of had some deferral in terms of merit. So being upfront about the state of the business and saying what are some of the actions that we need to take, good and bad, and involving them pretty much in advance. I think a lot of the leader communications really helps, because it really gives a very good picture of where we are going as an organization, how we are doing as a company. And that really helps to tone down expectations of employees. I also feel that in a situation like this, at least I'm sensing that employees really want to help because they see that the company is looking after them, the company needs their help. So I feel that somewhere there is a willingness to sort of stretch and work. There are some parts of our organization, and I work in a shared service environment, where we have actually seen productivity go up. And people are willing to stretch, they're willing to sort of go out of their way to make things happen. So I was a little taken aback when I heard the question about, lower targets, because at least at Ford, I don't see it. And yes, the business is very tough. In India, for instance, our dealerships have not been open through all of the lockdown. So you can't sell cars. That's how tough it is. But the fact is that, it's not a forever situation. We need to come out of it. And we need our people to sort of work along with us and make things better for the company.
Thank you.
With respect to add to what Gangapriya said, I think just one aspect would be recognizing some of the exceptional work which is happening in these difficult circumstances. I think a lot of employees really value that acknowledgement, and they serve as exemplars for the larger ecosystem. So I think it's a good measure to recognize where work is exceptional in nature. It really helps.
If I were to add one thing, is a lot of communication, like we have said, communication that gives reassurance and optimism, but also transparency. And employees appreciate that now more than ever. What is possible, what's not possible, what's the real state of affairs. I think transparency is super important, as also reminding people of their larger purpose. And we found that our frontline heroes who work the hardest lead from a sense of purpose and pride. And I think now more than ever, CHROs can evoke that to keep the momentum going in the organization.
Thank you, Anuradha. I just want to share Dr. TV Rao sir's comment to your previous point, Anuradha. He says, excellent point, Anuradha. HR should realize and work with multiple stakeholders, including customers, employees, community, besides shareholders and their executives. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So next, I have a question from Raghunandan SV. He's asking, what are the challenges for the CHRO in ensuring that same dedication, integrity is maintained in ensuring productivity? Which one of you would like to take this?
Yeah, I'll start off. And I think I did allude to this a little earlier. You know, when we allow employees that space, trust, the empowerment to deliver their work, I think they perhaps perform at their best. And just being virtual, we perhaps had no choice as people leaders, but to provide space and along with that, the empowerment and the trust. So I think it'll be good if we can continue that and people will see the value and benefit of it on the other side when things sort of get better. So I think that's something that would definitely make a difference. The second thing is that, you know, if you have stayed together in tough times, then I think there is an obligation that and a feeling of gratitude that comes with that. And I think people will be willing to do much more when things get better. So that's something that I have seen happening. And we hope that, again, that will be some a value that we will be able to sort of count on. But, you know, it's also quite possible when things are back to normal, people may get back to their normal ways. But this has been such a drastic change that I am quite optimistic that people would have learned their lessons and will make for a better future for themselves.
Okay, thank you, Gangapriya. We have a question from Gopal Mahapatra. He's asking, how have you attempted sharpening leadership agility or resilience? Amitabh or Anuradha, would one of you like to take this one?
I think let me attempt it.
Sure, Gangapriya.
Just the fact that we told all employees on a Friday evening that Monday onwards work from home was a true test of their agility and flexibility. The second thing is that you know, working from home meant we needed to have all the equipment in place, and many of our employees are not really equipped to be able to work from home, or neither can they sort of carry their laptops home because many of them work on desktops and engineering workstations and things like that. So enabling that entire move overnight over the weekend was really something really would have tested it. And, you know, I remember that we have this engineering team in Ford, and for the longest time, the manager has been saying that, you know, he just cannot permit work from home. And he came about 2 weeks into this work from home situation, smiling and saying, you know, I think I made a mistake. All of our people seem to be working well. Yes, there are productivity issues, but this is a new thing that we have learned for ourselves, and it gives us new opportunities. So I think people don't need to be taught this. I think they had the live experience of it. And yeah, I believe the learnings can be quite strong when you go through it yourself.
Thank you, Ganga.
I think the other way you could support agility, and which we have experimented and done actually, is that you know, sometimes locally leaders need the institutional help of the organization. And it's important that they are able to reach out to senior stakeholders sometimes and leverage that assistance. I think enabling that has ensured that leaders are able to take local responses very quickly. And where they have needed institutional support, they have received it right from the apex of the organization. I think that also is very comforting and gives them a lot of confidence that they're on the right path.
So we have a lot of questions pouring in, and you know, with respect to time, we're almost just past 1 hour since we started. So I will have one last question, and you know, you can answer this one. My question, this is from Ashok Gaikwad. He's asking how much technology upgraded the HR fraternity will have to be in the time to come.
I can take this. I think digitization is a trend that we have been seeing over the last many years. If anything, it will get accelerated as a result of the current context. I think the focus will be much more around efficiency, productivity, and therefore HR professionals will have to think about what digitization means, not just from an HR context, but fundamentally what it means for the business, how it will rewire business operations and the core of business, and then what is the implication of that on reskilling people, and also the implication of the making sure that in doing all of this, we continue to be positive to creating jobs and employment in the country. So I think it's digitization, but digitization in a much broader context of preserving livelihoods and growth opportunities, which are so critical now for our country.
Thank you, Anuradha. Would Gangapriya or Amita would like to add something to this point?
Well, I would only like to add that I think there was a phase of digitization which was about accessing employee information and taking informed decisions. But I also think that there is going to be this huge movement of digitization of the entire workflow. If you're going to adopt work from home as one of the means going forward, it will become very critical that not just employee information and events, but the entire workflow is digitized. I think that's going to be a significant shift in the way we operate.
Thank you, Amita. We have another comment from Dr. T.V. Rao sir. He says research approach and research-based discussion like this is an excellent contribution of NHRD. Hope we can find more such interventions for HR community in the future. So now I would just share my screen. So just to wrap up, I would like to thank the panelists, Amitav, Gangapriya, and Anuradha for sharing your experiences and thoughts with us, and the participants for your time. I would like to thank Krish for the opportunity, Nikita, Mitch, Dhananjay, Avinash, Bhagat, Darpan, and NHRD team for all their support. Last but not the least, I would like to thank our devices, the internet and Wi-Fi for making this web panel discussion complete. I request you all to go through our research links that will be provided on the YouTube chat below this video, on LinkedIn and our Twitter pages of NHRD. I would like to leave you all with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. The future depends on what you do today. Let's learn, let's have fun, and let's stay safe today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirtana.
Thank you, Kirtana. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you all those who tuned in.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.